Former President Trump's new legal team, named just a few days ago, is facing a deadline today to lay out the bulk of its argument against the article of impeachment. Mr. Trump changed course after parting ways with his expected lead attorney and at least one other lawyer over the weekend. One of the new attorneys is David Schoen, who previously represented the former president's longtime advisor Roger Stone for a brief period. Schoen gave a preview last night of what the defense could look like.
Besides the fact that this process is completely unconstitutional and that this is a very, very dangerous road to take with respect to the First Amendment, putting at risk any passionate political speaker. But now we know also that the agenda, Ms. Pelosi and others, is simply to bar President Trump from ever running for president again. And that's about as undemocratic as you can get.
All right, for some legal analysis, let us bring in CBS legal contributor Rebecca Roiphe. So, Rebecca, what do we make of Schoen's remarks? Does the argument that it is unconstitutional to hold an impeachment trial for an ex-president have merit?
So it sounds like the tone of the legal defense, at least, has not changed with the lawyers. It sounds like he's focusing on the legal questions rather than on this question that Major was bringing up about the election fraud and the alleged stealing of the big steal of the election, which has been debunked at this point. And so it's important to note that. I think that, there are arguments both sides on this constitutional question. My personal view is that having read all of these different arguments, the arguments on the side of it being constitutional to hold a trial of a former president have more merit, more basis in the language and history of the Constitution. But, you will see arguments on both sides, and that's a valid legal defense. And I think it's interesting to see his new team focusing on the same questions that the Senate Republicans want to focus on and, that allegedly his old team was focusing on as well.
Yeah, let's talk briefly about the old team that, quit over the weekend. And the reporting was that Mr. Trump wanted them to focus on his baseless claims of election fraud. Can you just talk about how problematic that would be if that was actually argued as a defense for this?
Sure, 100%. But I'll say before that, it's just kind of a mess. I mean, I think that it's important to note that, in any big trial, in any trial, you don't want your legal team quitting and a whole new legal team being brought in just a week before the case is being tried. It shows that there's turmoil. It shows that, there's a lack of organization and there's a lack of unity among the defense team, and that's problematic no matter what. So in terms of the question about arguing election fraud, lawyers have obligations. They have obligations to represent their clients zealously, and that is the main and most important obligation that a lawyer has. And so any of these lawyers are going to represent President Trump zealously, as well they should. There are some limits to that. Lawyers are not allowed to argue frivolous cases, which means that if the case has absolutely no basis in law and fact, then they cannot argue it. So the question is, would it be ethical for a lawyer to bring up the election fraud question? And it would be you would have to bring it up in a very delicate way, not to be essentially putting forward a false defense. And so I think you see a parade of lawyers very, very hesitant to go that route. And I can understand why President Trump wants to do that, because he wants to clear his name. He wants to say, I did nothing wrong. I mean, that's kind of his refrain, right? But sometimes it's much more effective in a case like this not to argue, oh, this person did nothing wrong, but rather to focus on some flaws in the case that's being brought. And here, the Republicans, I think, would be much smarter, the lawyers would be much smarter to focus on legal problems with the articles of impeachment, and as well as some factual problems that there are in the proof. And so if they can do that, if they can say President Trump didn't really incite this violence, he had a loud, passionate rally, but he didn't incite the violence, and it's unconstitutional to impeach a former official, that is a safer way to go, especially knowing the jury. I mean, in most trials, you don't get a sense of the jury the way you do in this one. And so it seems obvious that that's the right, most effective defense, but you've got a client there who wants to clear his name, and always has his eye to the public and always has his eye to his legacy and his reputation. So that's what the tension must have been. But it seems that the new lawyers are actually towing the line, or that the old lawyers were. So even if the old lawyers lost to kind of chemistry with the president, it doesn't sound like this is a major 180-degree shift in the trial strategy.
So now, Rebecca, on the other side, the House impeachment managers are planning to use video of the Capitol attack as part of their argument for conviction. But in this trial, just how crucial is the assault itself versus the context, the words, the tweets from the president in the weeks leading up to the attack, while the attack was happening, and after the attack?
So, two things. First of all, it's important to remember that impeachment is really more of a political proceeding than it is a legal proceeding. So we take and we analogize to these legal notions and trial. My background is as a trial lawyer, and most of the people, almost nobody has experience as an impeachment lawyer because they're so rare. Not in this administration, but historically. So it is a different beast. It is its own thing. And so every time we talk about legal principles, we should have that kind of in the back of our mind, that there isn't a way to map one onto the other. That said, in a proceeding like this, you often have one side wanting to focus on the facts and the other side wanting to distract from the facts. The facts are not helpful here, and the gory details of that riot are good for the Democrats and bad for the Republicans. It's people look at that and they feel horrified on the basis of our democracy, on the basis of our country, the complete disrespect for our Capitol, and to the extent that the Democrats can put that at the heels of this president on his lap, then they win. And so, I can see why they want to focus on that. Legally, of course, it is much more relevant what happened leading up to that, what happened at the rally, what happened in speeches leading up to the rally, and those are just a little bit more, those facts are a little bit drier, and they also open themselves up for the Republican argument, if the Republicans choose to go down this route, that the president was merely just encouraging a rally, a peaceful rally on his behalf, not actually inciting violence. But once you see that violence, it's hard not to want to blame somebody. And if you want to blame somebody, there's an obvious person sitting right there, and that's the person being tried. So they're just different strategies that are going to have different results, both with regard to the senators who are watching and, more importantly, really possibly to the public.
All right, Rebecca, thank you so much.